Okay, wonderful. It looks like it's recording. Okay, this is week 5, September 2, HCA520. This is a directed study, and it's the afternoon here with Ms. Montoya. And of course, what is due today is that module 2 lesson that we talked about last week. Okay, and now we're going to now briefly discuss module 3 and what do we need to be done for next week. Let's first look at the task. For module 3. Now, we already discussed that IT plan, right? Now we're going to be looking to these chapters, chapter 6 and chapter 7, and these in between. So if you look at these chapters, it relates to this. These chapters relate to that, and these videos relate to that. So what do you want to do? First, this investigate communication plans. This is just tells you how to make a communication plan. But your main thing that you'll be doing for your task is to design an actual plan. And again, like I always stated on previous sessions, you can try to reinvent the wheel, but my suggestion is find a communication plan from a similar facility like a hospital facility or any healthcare facility, and use it, and also have that workflow analysis. Those like this. Those like there's like triangles and arrows. So look through a workflow and then ask yourself, who do I like? If I'm gathering information, like for example, look at healthcare or insurance claims. Let's look at this.
Okay.
Here's a classic example. And you might see it fuzzy, but you'll get the idea of the circles and squares. So when you look at it, where is it? Okay. So this is like an example of a typical workflow. It's like, what do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? What do you do fourth? And if you look at this, this looks like the thing that we were talking about last week about the insurance billing cycle, right? Which is, even clinical people should know what that is. So we're always identify my patient, right? Pre-register my patient, right? Do they need insurance application or they need help? Then submit the form, track the approvals, because remember, you got to see, did the money come in? Did we get approvals? And then of course, have the patient come in again and then reapply. So there's a protocol, there's a step. So it asks you like what healthcare tools, like which tracking and documentation, reporting workbench, especially when you're trying to get in money. And remember, we talked about how a lot of big time facilities, especially in my home state of New York and definitely New York City, how they're behind on their billing, almost up to 90 days. That's why many times when you go to a large healthcare facility, you don't get the bill immediately, especially if they have problems such as this. So your homework for this task is to either find or create something like this, but in the form for communication. So who gets to talk to who? Like a classic example would be, okay, the doctor, right, communicates with the nurse. The nurse has the management, right? And then the nurse carries out the management. Now, the diagnosis is the responsibility of the doctor, not the nurse. So the doctor has to report diagnosis codes. The nurse has to report procedure codes because the nurse did stuff and the doctor stated summary data in the form of a diagnosis code. So you could have like a circle or something that says clinical and then an arrow going to insurance or to the finance group, and then another arrow. So it's workflow. And you could do it in the communication of how does clinical talk to finance? How does clinical talk to HR? How does clinical talk to the lab? And how to set up a communication plan is in this lovely, lovely thing here in LinkedIn Learning, and you could use that as an example. And let's look at it while we're here.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, I have to sign in. Okay, I'm game. Thought it would just let me in. And it should let me. So
If you've ever heard Abbott and Costello,
so you it goes and it's just like, and it's really quick, you know. But my thing is find something that's more specific, you know, that, and even if it was IT communication, think like globally, communication within the entire facility, and you can even melt it and merge it with the things that you were talking about last week with Mercy Hospital. You could do that as well.
Okay.
And the stuff, oh, and you definitely have to, because remember the stuff that we were talking about last week, preventing scope creep and cost overrun. That's also the other analysis that you do so that you make sure that, hey, you know, so think of it more of a communication plan and less than an IT plan. Now,
Okay.
what is the discussion? So you watch this video. Is it a YouTube video? Yes, it is. That. It's only 20 minutes,
It worked. And in
and
Okay.
it's another TED Talk. So remember what I discussed about active listening, right? You know, I'm not a fan of like TED Talks and
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But in everything, there's always a hidden gem. Even if and I also had a conversation with one of the students regarding a discussion, because she was kind of upset that some people disagreed with her on a
Mhm.
discussion, which is okay, as long as you did it respectfully. And her
Yeah.
thing was like, I worked really hard on the discussion. Like, how can you just dismiss my discussion? Well, if someone has alternative facts that match your facts, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a bad thing. It could just mean just another option. Many times when I've been at board meetings, people would say, oh, why are you attacking me? I'm not. I am
Mhm.
presenting simply another alternative. So again, back to that communication chart that you can make. Like if one department doesn't want to work with me, there's always another way to skin a cat. And also, part of that communication aspect that you should add into as well is what to do if there's conflict. Let's say, for example, finance and the clinical can't see eye to eye. Who will be the person who will mitigate the the both views? Because many times, and I gave concrete examples in previous sessions that we had. Many times, you know, both departments are right. As a former dean, as a former VP of academics, there's many times where both departments are philosophically correct,
Mhm.
and they neither wants to budge. But as a leader, I have to tell them, well, this is what's going to happen, right? And sometimes one side has to win, and then
Mhm.
maybe next month the other side. I'll give it to the other side to be fair.
Mhm.
And especially because many times, because if you have a lot of thinking people in the room, it's not about right or wrong. It's just about difference of opinion. And you know that in the hospital, if you have 5 doctors in a room, you're going to have 6 different opinions. You
Yeah.
have 6 different diagnoses if there's 5 doctors in the room. Everyone will think they're right. And most likely, they're all professionals. They're most likely all right, or different degrees of right. So again, back to what we were talking about before. Look at your benchmarks. Look at the data, and you have to look at it subjectively and objectively. And what do I mean by subjectively? You also have to deal with politics in play. Like I just said, sometimes one side has to win. Other times another side has to win. So in my former leadership role, when both people are right, I pick, it's not really arbitrary. I pick kind of like which is the lesser of the evil, which would cause the least amount of friction between my team.
Yeah.
And that's and good leadership does that. You can't avoid friction, but you can mitigate it and you can lessen it. And then if group A has the friction this term, well, next term group B, and I always as a former leader, I always promote tit for tat, like give one side their dues and another side their dues. So when you're looking at the wonderful and terrifying implications of computers, right? And AI. AI is a really, really wonderful thing, but have you ever taken a computer course? Do you know anything about computer programming or anything like that? Or
No, I have not.
basic computer?
It's in my to-do list, but I
Okay,
haven't yet.
well, at this point of the game, let me give you a broad overview of
Okay.
computer science. There's always an input and there's always an output. And there's a saying in computer language school is data garbage in, garbage out, or poor data management, poor data analysis will come of it. And that's why, in the clinical world, I'm only as good as the data given to me. Many times the doctor or the nurse gets blamed like, oh, you didn't know, you didn't see it. Well, if my subordinates or my colleagues didn't see it and didn't properly inform me, then I only can go on based on what limited data that I have. And in many times in the real world, that's how it is. So there's implications for AI, because what if the AI is learning wrong or learning poorly? Or what if the data given to the artificial intelligence is wrong? Because the computer is only as good as the person who programmed it. So especially algorithm analysis, and we talked about big data, remember, in the first section?
Yes.
Remember we talked about big data, how
Yes.
hospitals are taking all this massive amounts of data and they're churning it and using it. And the way they do it and get the analysis out quicker and better than human beings is using algorithms. And an algorithm is a program that can predict things. Like it can predict, remember the example I gave you, Inova has this wonderful algorithm to predict high-risk fall patients. And over the last 5 years, they've reduced the number of falls at Inova Fairfax by 30%. And that is phenomenal. Why? Because the data that was put in was good. So the data that came out was better and it improved metrics. And that's the goal of artificial intelligence or thinking computers, right? And because you also know the bad parts of it. Like how many times when you want to order something, have you ever tried ordering something through your phone or through Siri? And then next thing you know is like, oh, can I order a cheesesteak sandwich? And he goes, calling Chinese steakhouse. No, cheesesteak sandwich, calling Chinese steakhouse. And you're like, Jesus, never mind. Let me just right?
Yeah.
Because again, garbage out, garbage in, garbage out. And even to this day, even when I was a kid, I told you I was a computer nerd. Me and my girlfriend's father he was an ex-Navy guy, and he actually taught me a lot about computer programming. And we used to mess with voice recognition back in the 90s. Open file, please. Now, here's the funny thing. If you don't say it exactly the way it was programmed, it won't acknowledge it. And it's the same thing. And this can also be related to also how you train your people, because that's also another thing. And Dr. Alexa, our interim dean of nursing, she and I were just talking about that, about how not easy it is to train people. So you can only imagine how not easy or difficult it is to train a computer, especially a computer designed to learn and designed to think. Because just like human beings, do you think they can learn things wrong? Yes, they can. And and there's a terrifying implication of that, because remember, we're in healthcare. If we mess up, people get sick or they die. So it's not like an algorithm to pick, oh, did you get the proper color socks from Amazon?
Right.
That's not. So the implication for our business is far more serious. And again, make it at least 300 words, at least 1 or 2 citations. Make the citations from 2021, please. Some of you
Okay.
guys are trying to pass off some weak citations to me, and I'll call you out on it. Because remember, this is graduate school. I got to be a little bit stringent, but you know me right now in my grading. You see me. I'm a sweetheart. I'm very, very lenient, and I want this class to be more like a, and just to be clear, right? Do the work, get the grade, but I want it to be more like a, like a quick back and forth, a quick conversation on knowing and understanding how systems and how good systems have a distinct beginning, middle, and end, have a distinct input, processing, and then an output. And then knowing that if there's a lot of processes, because the other thing that we discussed last week, remember, if there's too many processes or too many arrows, don't you think they'll be very confusing? And not only that it's confusing, remember I shared with you some of the things that I learned in my management classes and my processes classes in my own graduate studies. The more arrows you have, the more spaces in between people or communication gaps, the more inefficiency and the more issues with a potential error, right? Just like that game. I don't know. Have you ever played that game Telephone in school, in grade school? Have you played that game?
I
Where
don't know. What is
you
that about?
whisper a message into your friend's ear, and then they
Oh,
whisper it to somebody
yeah.
else, and by the time it gets to the end of the room, the message gets
Completely
recorded.
different.
You know,
Yes.
like the original message with babies are cute, and then by the end, it's something like Hitler lives in Bermuda, and you're like, how did we get to Hitler? How did we get to Bermuda from babies are cute? Because
Yeah.
the more there are processes, the more there are gaps in communication. One person who has to talk to another person, who has another talk to another person. That's when processes get complicated, diluted, and very dangerous. That's why they like AI, because it's one-stop shop. But I don't know. There's a lot of complicated processes within AI, and especially in the training phase. That's why I don't trust a lot of it. And you've seen some of the scary videos that are online where they put like they put like a Google machine and a Siri machine in the same room, and they start talking to each other, and
Really?
it's
I
almost
have not seen
nonsense.
that.
It's almost
I'm gonna.
nonsense, but then it becomes frightening nonsense.
Yeah.
And you're like, and it also begs the question. You could take that also to your psychology courses. Is it really communication, or is it just simply data going back and forth with no real goal, with no real process?
Right.
And actually, that's where we get into the Turing test, which is the test to know that your artificial intelligence is real. And the Turing test is it's this test, like it's a set of like questionnaires, and it's a concept that if we already had an advanced artificial intelligence like a robot, are we able to tell the difference between that robot and an actual human being?
Wow.
And a lot of times, especially for if you've ever went through the telephone process for the Center for Medicaid Medicare Services, there are times where I'm like, is this a human being I'm talking to? It doesn't feel like a human being.
Yeah.
So it begs the question. When I was a biller, there were many times that it's a human voice, but not. Like those fake human voices, for TikToks and for
Yeah.
YouTube videos.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that. Like it's human, but not. And
Yeah.
that's something that you could also talk about as well, because we're in the human communication business. So
Okay.
that's the discussion. That's due next week.
Okay.
And so do the task. The task should be easy because a lot of it was answered before. So you know what? Let's look at the lesson.
Lesson 3.
It's like the
You
same
mean
thing.
Okay, let me go to lesson 3.
The lesson module 3. How would you roll it out? That's the last part. So a
Okay.
rollout. So how would you market it to your team? How would you train your team on a communications plan? Who do you have to talk to? Who goes? How are you going to set it up? So it's kind of like a continuation. Like you already have your plan, your communication plan. So the next part of this lesson is how do you roll it out? Okay. So
Okay.
let's
And by roll it out, you mean how
but like, how do you
to?
market it to your team? Like, let's
Okay.
say I have a new IT communications process, right?
Uh-huh.
Or a communication process within my facility. How do I roll it out? Who do I have to talk to first? Do I let the leaders deal with it first? Or do I do the people? Do I do everyone at once?
Okay.
Do it.
Okay.
Hint, hint, don't create it yourself. Look it up because there's a way to do it. Because I remember the first time I used to be a faculty coach, and
Uh-huh.
that is the person who teaches. And the reason why they gave it to me is because I had the highest, student satisfaction rate in that particular college. So they said, hey,
Oh.
a couple more bucks, can you be the faculty coach? And I go, what does that mean? You teach others how to teach so that they can have high satisfaction rates. Guess what? My first couple of months, was I successful? No, because I didn't know how to get my skill
Teach.
sets
Yeah.
out to people. How do I market it? And also, at the time, I was what, 33? If you're a teacher who's been teaching for 30 years and you're in your 60s, how are you going to listen to that kid? And actually, that's what someone actually said to me. And he goes, with all due respect, Nelson, you're a kid. Why should I listen to you?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa. That was a dean of arts and sciences. And I'm like, I don't know, dean. I just get paid to yap here. So, and that was not the right answer.
Mhm.
I should have shown, and then after a while, I showed a better way to market it. I showed, and also use from your experience as well. How do you deal with a hostile crowd in your job? Because isn't your job, are you a manager in your current position?
No, no.
Or have you ever managed people?
No, I have
No?
not.
Oh, well,
No.
wait until you do. It's a blast. Being the leader is not what it's all cracked up to be. It's hard because all you're doing all day is trying to make people do things that they don't want to. Because everyone
Yeah.
always thinks that they know better. Everyone always thinks that, why are you bossing me around? No one, when we're adults, we don't like to be parented. No one does.
Yeah.
So that's something you should consider when you roll out. Like, how do I get it without, being top down? Or maybe that's the thing you're going to choose, be top down. I've been at
Mhm.
facilities that said, oh, by Friday, if you don't do the training, you'll be let go from your position. And then Friday, some people didn't do the training and they were let go. And I was like, whoa, I'm
Wow.
I'm lucky I did, or they got pipped, which is just as bad, right? A performance improvement plan doesn't necessarily mean performance improvement. It means you got 30 days to pack your stuff. All right. But again,
Yeah.
look at your MBA, use performance improvement plans, use PIPs as motivations, and not negative motivations. Just to show people like, okay, this is what I believe you could do. And trust me, and trust me, you could do this, it'll improve this, that, and the other thing. And that was my thing when I became a more seasoned leader. It was less of the top down. My first leadership experience, I was what 18, 19. I was a squad leader in the Corps, and who's going to listen to me? I'm 5 foot nothing. And that's exactly what happened. I got into fights. I
Wow.
just tried to yell over everybody, and that doesn't work. And I learned really early in my life that top down, authoritarian, authoritarian all the time never
Yeah.
works. You'll get
Mhm.
enough fear for the moment, but for the long run, they're never going to listen to you. And
Wow.
honestly, they'll do things to sabotage you. But if you're all in it together, and there's a sense of camaraderie and a sense of I'm not your friend, but we're all in the same boat. Then how many
Yeah.
times I've been with nursing staff that they don't particularly like me as a person or even as a professional. Like, I'm a kid, I'm new, I didn't, yeah, I'm not part of this particular team, but mutual respect. How many times I save them and they save me, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And then that's something to consider when you're rolling out your marketing plan. Who are your stakeholders that we talked about? Will they be offended? Will they be surprised or shocked with what they have to do? And there's something in sales is, if you recall your MBA stuff, work the objectives. Try to look at it from the perspective of your subordinates and your colleagues. look at the worst. That's why being a consummate pessimist, which I am, that's why being a pessimist the way I am, I'm always looking at worst case scenario. So I'm always looking at, okay, worst case scenario, I have a mutiny on my hands. No one wants to listen to me. So what do I need to do for them to listen to me? How do I get them on my side? You know? So when you're thinking about rolling out something, okay, how am I going to do this? Who am I going to assign the roles? Like, will I make it mandatory? How will the deadlines work? So these are things to consider. And here in this class, it seems so easy just to write, design a communication plan, roll out the information system across all departments. It's easy to say, right? It takes 2 seconds. But now that I've explained some of it to you, it's not that easy, is it?
Yeah,
It's
no.
a lot more complex than it leads on to me. And that's why a course like this needs to be proctored, because if it was just simply online, you'd be like, what the hell does this mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so it's
Yeah,
all
so I have a quick question
shoot.
for this, just for the lesson 3. So the rollout plan is going to be like about like
For that thing you designed in the task 3.
in the
So
task
I'm going to
3.
go back
Okay.
to this. So the lesson is the rollout, or how are you going to train your people? How are you going to make it effective? How are you going to see if it even is effective? Because that's also another thing. In the real world, someone's going to ask you, okay, did you roll the thing out? Yeah. It goes, so how did it go? And I would say something like, I think it went okay. And then you know what my CEO would tell me? He goes, Nelson, he goes, numbers. Did you improve this, that, and the other thing? I don't care if you feel it's okay. And he used to say to me to my face, I don't care how you feel, Nelson. What does the data say? It goes, did the communication get faster? Are we more efficient? Are we making more money? I really don't care how you feel, Nelson. Actually, that's how I answered him once. I go, I feel it went well. He pretty much looked at me like I'm a moron.
Okay.
And it was a nice little message that, no, he wants to know, did it do what it was meant to do? Because we don't roll out projects for laughs. We roll out projects because it's going to make things better. And he'll ask, Nelson, what was the feedback from the departments? So when were you going to get feedback from the departments? Who are you going to get feedback from? Remember the undercover boss story that we talked about? And that that iceberg? Remember the management iceberg, that whoever's in the top part only sees a little bit of what's going on. It's only the worker bees and the people, the underlings or the subordinates, they know what's underneath that water. They know the dangers, they know the sharks and whatever horrible things that are under the water. That's why many times your chief executive officer or your chief financial officer, sometimes they look psychotic because they don't really know what reality is. They're like, oh, Nelson, you could do more. You could do 9%. And I go, well, if you were on the basement floor with me, you could see that we've never done better than 3. So what the heck are you talking about 9%? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So think about it that way. And also rolling it out to the uppers. So what? That's not going to affect change. Who are your worker bees? It's the people underneath that water. Those are the worker bees. And that's the things to consider in your lesson. And the discussion, that's easy. Now, the communication plan itself is in the task for module 3.
Okay, but for next week, we're just gonna do task 3 and discussion, right? Like we usually do.
But
and then the
you
weeks
can start working
after.
on that lesson as well.
Okay, but I don't have to submit anything until the week
Task
after,
3
right?
discussion. That sounds good.
Okay,
That sounds fair.
perfect. Just to double check.
And
Thank
then,
you so much.
I'll be posting grades by 12 noon Saturday. So if you have any questions, you can get them. Okay?
Okay. You say if I have any questions, what, sorry?
No, if you have any questions, you know how to get to me. You know how to call.
Okay,
Gotcha. If there's any questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. I will get this to YouTube.
Okay,
Right.
awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Okay, you too. Have a great weekend, Professor.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.